In my Tableau Vivant, I decided to choose Mary Magdalene as Melancholy by Artemisia Gentileschi. This piece was created in 1622 through 1625 and is now located at the Museo Somaya in Mexico. It was created with oil on canvas, a material that was very easy to get during this time, although it fluctuated in prices. This piece shows Mary as a personification of a mental disorder called melancholia. Melancholia was a Greek term used to describe intense sadness and hopelessness. Artemisia Gentileschi was an artist who was female. During this time, female artists weren't very recognized. The piece of art was created to say and interpret the artist herself's feelings. She was said to be raped, and we see details of this in this piece. The crease in her arm is meant to be an illusion of sex or a sexual sign. I learned a lot from this piece, and when I was looking through the options to pick from this assignment at first, I didn't know the true meaning behind this piece until I then did research. I had just thought she was tired and exhausted at first glance, and it reminded me of how I felt during the past 2 years. After doing in-depth research, I learned a much more meaningful aspect behind this piece. Some of the relevant differences and commonalities between the time in which Mary Magdalene was created and my time right now are, first off, the advanced and evolved technique as well as resources now compared to the 1600s is extreme. It was hard and very expensive to find supplies to create work, as well as it took much longer to create pieces. As we see, this one took 3 years. Not speaking artistically, during this time people had to rely on themselves for resources like food, clothing, and shelter, unless you were considered royalty. Christ and Catholicism was very big as well in pieces of art during this time. This is different from now because nowadays we see very advanced technology as well as advanced systems for food, and now have cities with thousands of buildings for homes and shelters. We still see a display of Catholicism today, but I don't typically think artwork shows the types of disguised symbolism and features we saw during the 1600s. This could have been because we have a very modern society nowadays. Women's rights have also evolved a lot during this time. Some of the similarities of my time in which and the time in which this piece was created are death by disease. We have seen drastic amounts of death due to COVID, around 6 million, and during this time the art was created, the Great Plague of Seville, which killed over 6% of its population, spread all over Europe. They also had strict government systems. Relating to something similar to this piece is the awareness of mental health, which is something we see a lot today. The implications of the selfie in the 21st century has in some cases resulted in different forms of obsession with self, body dysmorphic disorders, as well as low self-esteem. Our society is much different now in the 21st century than it was in the 1600s. During this time, the piece was created. I feel as if the implications of the selfie, or a self-portrait in this time, were to create and show divine beauty in meeting. The socioeconomic pressures of our world today have led students to have to work and juggle school. For example, COVID hit the world so quickly that it felt as if one day we had all the freedom in the world and the next day we were locked up in quarantine having to wear masks whenever need be. I personally had a hard time with this because I was a very visual learner, so I enjoyed being in person for classes, and it helped me a lot. So when we got switched to virtual, it took a long time for me to adapt and get used to things. And then I felt as soon as I adapted the chain to being virtual, we then got switched back to in-person school, which I then had to adapt to again. The main point of my tableau was to demonstrate myself and my feelings throughout the past 2 years. The key idea was to not imitate but reinterpret the work of art I choose, and I believe I did so in this. Although there are some things after doing research that I wanted to make sure I reinterpreted to address, is that this isn't representing any symbolization of rape or sex, although it is showing how I felt sad and exhausted during the time of lockdown, which I personally think a lot of people experienced because it was indeed a big change, especially as a young kid. This is my reinterpretation of Mary Magdalene as melancholy. As you can see, I made the choice to change the piece to represent myself more. I have changed the clothing My shoulder is exposed and I am wearing loose, comfortable clothing because I tended to wear that every day while being locked up in the house. I chose to keep the loose and unstable looking hand because in my eyes it represents exhaustion as well as the red and closed eyes. I tended to always be in bed during lockdown, which is why you see a blanket wrapped around me. I also have a mask around my wrist because when coming in and out of the house, I would make sure to have a mask on me all the time. My hair is wet as well because I have a sick family member, so I had to shower every time I got back from being outside of the house, as well as keeping myself safe because I had a surgery that I needed to stay healthy for. And finally, we see notebooks and pencils displayed on the side table because I was always overwhelmed and busy with work. And that is all of the changes I made and why I decided to make it. These are my sources, and I decided to use these two sources because it got let me understand a better in-depth understanding of the artist and the meaning behind her work. Thank you so much.